Hey everybody, welcome back to the Unshaken Truth podcast, where Jesus is our unshaken truth. I'm your host, Pearson Wilford. I have a very special guest, my friend, and one of my small group leaders at church. His name is Alex. Alex, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you today?
I'm doing good. So Alex has a great testimony just about how he used to be atheist and now he's following Christ and living that out. So we're going to explore that today, and I'm super, super excited. And this episode is also just going to be how you, the listener, can have good conversations with your atheist friends and all of that good stuff. So I just want to start to get to know Alex and really, who you were before Christ and kind of walk me through all of that. So Alex, let me first ask you this. So like growing up, did you have church in your life, or tell me a little bit about your childhood and where you're from and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I grew up in the Chicagoland area, I say Chicagoland area, really the suburbs of Chicago. My family were not believers. I wouldn't say we were like really militant atheists in any stretch of the imagination. It was just never something that we talked about. We never really talked about whether God was real, or never went to church. We never even went to church on like holidays or anything like that. My grandmother was Jewish, but she was kind of loosely practicing. So we played with dreidels and stuff like that when I was a kid. But never been to temple or anything like that myself. My uncle had a bar mitzvah when he was younger, but that's about the extent of it. So I mean, the only times I was ever at church was like a wedding, and that was even rare because we'd have weddings at event halls and to avoid going to churches and things like that. So really, faith was not a part of my life growing up.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So kind of like, obviously I'm bringing you on because you did identify as an atheist at one point. And so kind of like walk me through where you even got to that point of identifying as an atheist.
Sure.
And where you even got to that point throughout your childhood and maybe some of your teenage years and young adult years.
So when I was growing up, like I said, my family was non-believers. So I really had no one to shepherd me one way or the other, really. But in my mind, I always like to understand things. I've always been fascinated with how things work and whatever, and especially the sciences. Like I'd be that nerdy kid watching a Discovery Channel documentary in the evening about the Big Bang or something like that, because I always found that stuff interesting. Like creation always interested me, things like evolution and how things came to be. So I always had an interest in that, and I pursued that as I got older. Now I was always in like an agnostic place, I think, most of my life. Most of my young life, I should say. But when I was 15, my father passed away, and he passed away suddenly. Like it wasn't sickness or anything. It was, it was sickness. He didn't take care of himself, but it was very sudden. Like I went on spring break and everything was fine, and I came back to school after spring break. My dad was gone, and we'd already buried him.
Oh wow!
It was a shock. Yeah. Now my parents were divorced at the time. Both had been remarried, but I still had. I was the oldest of 5 siblings. Who had the same dad, half siblings, some of them are. But, and here I am, this 15-year-old kid with young siblings. I think my youngest brother was like 3 or 4 at the time. He was really little. Like he barely remembers my dad today. And that really drove me to atheism, because then I'm like, I keep hearing about, oh, Jesus loves you, right? You hear all the things, the Christian stereotypes when you're a non-believer and you don't know Christians. You just think of the stereotype you hear in the culture. So that's how I always thought of it, as, oh, kumbaya, Jesus loves you. And I'm like, well, how does Jesus love me taking my dad from me? That must mean there's no God, because this loving God I keep hearing about, there's no way he exists if he were to take a father away from 5 kids, right, and put me in this position of my siblings to look up to me, and I'm not ready for that, right? So that's when I really went into the atheism and identified myself that way. And then it was in college that my conscience started getting pricked. So my wife today, we've been together since we were 16, and she was a believer, and she grew up in church. We always had this disagreement, right? And we knew this disagreement, but we both loved each other enough that we moved past that. We ended up getting married at the end of college. But during college, whenever we'd bring it up, she would just kind of continue to ask questions like, well, why? Well, the Big Bang explains creation, great, but where did it come from? Oh, okay, well, why did that happen, or why did this happen, or how did this? And I didn't have a lot of good answers. I thought I was this like educated atheist and I can argue these things, and I was looking forward to missionaries coming to my door so I could debate with them, kind of thing. I'm not kidding. That happened in college, and a friend of mine was kind of in a similar vein, and we looked forward to that. But So I was very much so like Paul, right? Like I was persecuting Christians. I looked down on Christians, and I really believed in the stereotypes of what Christians believed.
Yeah.
But having my fiance at the time just poke holes in my worldview, and I think I'm this high and mighty academic, really bothered me. Because again, I like to understand things, and at least in my mind, it has to make sense to me. And if it doesn't make sense to me, that's a problem, and I like it to make sense. So I started researching more, and that's how I kind of found apologetics. I found works by Lee Strobel, William Lane Craig, and C.S. Lewis, and I started reading those things, and it really opened my eyes. And by the time we were getting married, I was definitely in an agnostic space. Like I believed God existed. I just hadn't come to Christ and come to know Him.
What were some key things that kind of, actually, well, before I get into that, walk me through some of the stories where because I kind of want to gain a good picture of what atheism is, and obviously what you believed, and maybe some other people do believe. And obviously this podcast is for Christians that are trying to go after the one, and that one might be totally neglected to the even idea of there is a God. And so kind of walk me through, like, what were some things that you believed as the time of your atheism that you were totally shut off to God, and what are some key things that you thought?
So what I believed of faith in general and of Christians specifically, atheists will look as believers as just, this is an antiquated way of looking at the world. Like it's a remnant of our old cultures when we didn't have things like science and medicine and technology. This was our ancient brethren. This was their way of explaining the world. Now we have science. Now we're these academics and we understand things, so we don't need these old beliefs. That's what atheists believe of religion, is that it's something that's just a remnant to our past that we haven't moved beyond.
Gotcha.
And they believe it's just hokey beliefs. Like the atheists will call God the invisible spaghetti monster in the sky because you have no way to tell me that's not what he looks like. Like that's what atheists think. And it's very stereotypical, and to be honest, it's very shallow. Most atheists will hide behind, they'll say, well, evolution proves that God didn't make man. Well, really? Because the evolution you believe in actually isn't supported by the fossil record. And the Big Bang explains why God didn't make the universe. Well, God said, "Let there be light."
Yeah. Yeah. So those are all different good things. So kind of like continue to kind of show me. So you're at a point where you're kind of agnostic. So kind of explain what that means for the viewer that might not know that, and what kind of stage your life in that sense where you're about to get married and stuff like that.
So I'll walk through. So when you consider yourself an atheist, and to be honest, I don't think there's a lot of people that consider themselves hard atheists. Most people are in some way of agnostic, but atheist basically says, I don't believe there's any higher power whatsoever. The physical, or largely they deny anything spiritual, like whether the soul exists or whatever. And it's a very materialistic worldview. The physical is all there is. There's no next life. There's no afterlife. But then at the same time, they may believe in something like a multiverse, which they also can't see or measure. But that's what an atheist says, and that's what I was in high school and early college. An agnostic really is basically saying, I don't know. Those are the people who say, I'm not so sure. I kind of think there might be a God of some sort, or I'm not sure there's a God or not. So they don't necessarily sit back and deny the spiritual and deny there's not some sort of higher power. They may believe that, but they won't consider themselves Christians or Muslims or Jews or anything. They just think, I believe in some sort of higher power. It's mostly where agnostics fall. Or I think the biggest chunk of people that you'll run into is people who just haven't made their mind up. They just don't know. They haven't been shepherded one way or the other. They've either been shepherded by the culture, which doesn't, again, I told you, really shallow, surface level understanding, or there's no one sharing the gospel with them to hear the other side. So most people are just like adrift without anybody shepherding them one way or the other, and they're just, the amount of times I've heard, well, I've just never really thought about it. I'm like, you've never really thought about whether there's a higher power that created all this and is involved in your life? It's kind of a big question to answer, and it just boggles my mind that people can just go through their lives, almost their entire lives, and never really, in their own mind, answer that question for themselves. Do I believe God exists or not? Like, that's the question. Everything you believe and how you carry yourself in your life will change based on how you answer that question. And so many people are just like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and that's really sad because obviously as Christians, like that is our main priority. Like, you know, we're going through a series at Gateway, like seek the one and find the one that Jesus, you know, left the 99 for the one for. And so it's just so hard when people are just so reluctant to that. And so, but yeah, so continue. So you're getting married and you're kind of like more on the agnostic side. And so kind of walk me through the next steps of like, where did you continue to find Christ, or what?
Sure.
Lead me to the moment where you found Christ.
Sure. So after we got married, it was only like 18 months later that my eldest daughter, Ashlyn, was born. And at that point, my wife started going to church on a regular basis, even bringing Ashlyn when she was real little, like real little. And it was a small church. It wasn't like Gateway. It was, I think there was maybe 30, 40 people who showed up on Sunday, and there was only one service. And it was mostly elderly people, which if you're in if in Illinois or up north in a lot of states, that's kind of the culture. The church culture there it's very different than it is here. Here it's very open and it's more welcoming to share your faith with people. Whereas up north, it's in a lot of other states, coastal states, it's not. It's kind of taboo to share your faith outside of church. The culture has kind of pushed you to keep your faith in those four walls on Sunday at church for 1 hour, and it's taboo to talk about it otherwise. So I didn't get it that way. But I also saw that people who do go to church and raise their family in church, that there's good values that come from that. So I was perfectly fine as not a Christian having my wife and my daughter go to church. Now, I didn't go with her for a while. But at that point, I was researching and I was interested, and I'd gotten to the point where, okay, if God is real, which I kind of was starting to believe God was real, well, what religions am I looking? Who's right? Let me look around a little bit. And if you look around, okay, well, Islam and Judaism and Christianity come from the same root of Abraham. So there must be something to this. So let me look into this. And I started going to church with my wife and just kind of listening in. And the church at the time really wasn't. It's a small church, but they did not go into a deep theology. Like, I can't remember a single time they preached out of the epistles. It was more just focused on Christ's words and very surface level Christianity 101. I think we would have ended up leaving that church had we not moved, but I still found my faith there. And God worked through even the surface level Christianity 101 I was getting was enough to prick my conscience to be like, okay, there's something to this. When I started actually reading the New Testament and reading Christ's words, it was like, this isn't just like a book. This isn't just like reading one of the apologetics or science books I read, or even ones with narrative. This was different. This was cutting deep on a level of the understanding of human nature that, to me, was like, I mean, for lack of a better term, it was spiritual. And that really spoke to me that, okay, Christ, this is speaking to like me personally. Like, I feel personally attacked by these words, right, in the New Testament. This isn't just like I mean, even like Proverbs doesn't quite read that way, even though it's pretty profound.
Yeah, it is.
But Christ's words really cut deep, and
For sure.
and that you'll read them. This is, I mean, it's a living, breathing document, right? You read it a different time and take it a totally different way, and it speaks to you right where you're at, and that really got me there. So then I was starting to get to the point where, okay, I'm starting to believe in this Jesus guy, like. And then I read A Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. Well, I actually saw the film first. Then I read the book. It's less of a time commitment.
Yeah.
The book is actually pretty long, but it's good. I would recommend both. And that really, okay, that at least proved to me that Christ was who he says he was. And that's huge, right? A guy claiming to be God, performing these miracles, comes back from the dead. That changes everything. So I finally got to the point where I prayed for the first time. And what I prayed for was God to give me a little nudge. I was kind of like right there on the edge. I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready to believe, but I need a little bit more. Can you just kick me, hit me? Just, if you're there listening to this, give me a little bit something. And literally, like that week at church, the pastor preached on doubting Thomas.
Ooh.
And I didn't realize it right away. It was like a couple hours later, it occurred to me. I was driving at the time. And it occurred to me that I got my answer. And it was so overwhelming at that point, like finally believing and knowing that all this was real. Jesus was who he says he was. I had to pull the car over. I got emotional.
Wow.
And right there in the car, I gave my life to Christ. I was baptized later, but right there in the car was like, okay, this is it. Truth has always been important to me, even when I was a non-believer. What is true? And this was the truth.
Wow.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Wow, that's so powerful. And
Yeah.
it's so cool how the holiest times in our life sometimes even happen just in our car.
Yeah,
I think it's so funny, but it's so true. And no, that's so impactful of how God just kind of pricked you and kept on pricking you. And so, kind of, obviously for the listener, because we kind of talked before. What are some good resources? Obviously, you mentioned Lee Strobel. What are some good resources of like good apologetics that you would recommend that really helped you in your faith journey and could help somebody else?
Yeah, so we were talking about this earlier, but I do think the church as a whole, not our church, but just the church as a whole, doesn't do a good job equipping believers to have these kind of discussions.
No.
Most people are not interested in it. I get it. Like I realize that I'm kind of the weird one that likes that stuff. I know that.
Me too.
But when somebody comes and has an objection, whether it's they want to talk about, okay, well, you're a Christian. What do you have to say about evolution? What do you have to say about the Big Bang? What do you have to say about this, that, or the other? The big question, the one that's the hardest to debate is, if God's all good, why do bad things happen? It's a hard question to debate. I mean, it was the reason I turned to atheism in the first place. And it's, I don't think people are equipped enough to have those conversations, because when an atheist brings that objection, you can't ask an atheist to go on faith on something. You have to give some kind of, I mean, Peter tells us in 1 Peter that have a ready defense for what you believe. And I think it's almost a language or a subject that Christians don't do a good job of. So from resources, a good kind of overview for apologetics and kind of hits all subjects is I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Frank Turek is a really good one. It kind of itemizes a lot of the different objections to Christianity, including science-based things, philosophy, the case for Christ's resurrection, and those sorts of things. William Lane Craig is a good read. He's a hard read.
Yeah, he is.
He's very academic. I have his book. I think it's called On Guard. And it really reads like an apologetics textbook. Like it goes deep, but it's very academic. But he gives great speeches. He does a lot of good YouTube stuff I would recommend for kind of shorter listens. The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel, also The Case for a Creator by Lee Strobel are very good. Another one, one I listened to, but I was kind of already a believer at this point, was Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus.
Yeah, I've read that one.
That's a good one. But that one, it's more of a narrative. But again, I listened to that one when I was already a believer, just because I was kind of curious about the Muslim angle to things.
Did you ever this is a question kind of off script. Did you ever consider Islam or Judaism or anything else, or was it just kind of like?
Not really. No, not really. I think that was just because my wife had been going to church, and that's how I got to know Christ. Because that was like my next step is like, okay, let me look into this Jesus guy, and then if this Jesus guy is not answering all the questions I want, I would probably have looked at Judaism just because of my family history.
Gotcha.
But Islam seemed to have too many contradictions.
Yeah. So you obviously you gave your life to Christ. So kind of just tell me, what has life been like with Christ now?
So I will say, for someone coming from atheism whose mind is built like mine, who just likes to know things, I struggle with faith. I struggle with going on faith because I'm a planner. I want to know things. I want to know how things work. So sitting back and saying, all right, I need to trust that God's got this and trust his plan is difficult for me. And I know this is difficult for a lot of folks. Developing a prayer life was difficult coming to faith later in life. It was not something that was a routine. So the best way to describe it, I knew going in as a non-believer, I admitted I was a sinner. I knew I was a sinner. And I could itemize this, and this are things I know that are sinful that I do, that God, I want you to work on. And that's all well and good. That's my plan. And God said, sure, we can work on those things. But we're going to work on these things too at the same time. Things that I didn't even consider that God was going to start pricking my conscience about. It was like I had a plan. If I'm the house that God's going to come renovate, I knew we want to do the kitchen, we want to do the floor over here, we need to do that bathroom, and God's like, sure, but we're going to renovate this over here, we're going to renovate that, and we're going to do this. So it's not gone exactly as I had planned. I mean, it really, in a lot of ways, it brought us to Texas. We were I wasn't happy in the job I was in, and I was kind of looking around, and everywhere we went, and we're in Illinois. It's not exactly the next state over. But I was seeing, oh, Texas this, Texas license plates, Texas this, Texas that. I'm like, all right, we're getting slapped in the face here by God. He's telling us to look in Texas, and here where we are. So
That's awesome.
it's not gone according to my plan, and that's difficult.
No, for sure.
For someone who grew up not that way.
Yeah.
So
No, I get you for sure. So now I kind of want to like shift and kind of like talk about kind of advice for the viewers and how to really share the gospel with a friend that is going through their belief in God or believing in atheism just in general. And so what is the biggest thing that somebody shared to you whenever you were in your state of atheism and disbelief in God?
So 2 questions there, right? How do
Yeah.
we equip the non-believers? So the first part is you have to equip yourself to have the discussions. Not only, and most people growing up in church or in youth group or whatever, you get to the point where you're comfortable sharing the gospel. At least you can testify your own witness and share the gospel through that. But to be able to answer kind of the objections, I would at least get yourself to the point where you can answer some of these questions about evolution, about this, about why does God let bad things happen. And frankly, I mentioned a couple book resources, but Frank Turek, I mentioned, has a bunch of video resources online.
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk himself, we talked about Charlie Kirk. He did a whole bunch of apologetic stuff. I mean, in his debates, a lot of it was political, but a lot of it was theological.
Yeah.
And he has plenty of good stuff. He was very well versed. I'd heard some things, and actually Frank Turek was good friends with Charlie Kirk and was mentoring him on the faith stuff. I mentioned William Lane Craig, Ravi Zacharias, who's passed away, and sadly there were some things there.
Yeah,
you find out about him
talked
after.
about that, yeah.
But his video resources and his words still stand about sharing the gospel and be able to answer the questions. Because if atheist comes up with you and ask about evolution, and you immediately turn around and was like, well, let me tell you why Jesus saved you, you're not answering their objection. And they just assume that you're just ignorant. Because like I said, atheists believe Christians are just ignorant and living in the past. So if you can't intelligently debate your point to them, they're going to just discount whatever you have to say as just ancient myth and ancient legend. So you have to be able to articulate it. Now, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have a PhD in this. Because like I said, most atheists, beyond the question, they haven't really thought about it too. So you don't have to be an expert.
Gotcha.
But you should at least be able to answer the question. And what was the second part?
And the second part was, so whenever you were what was the biggest thing that somebody shared to you whenever you were in your state of atheism?
I don't know if I ever was like personally shared with that, because a lot of it was just like study on my own.
Okay.
But the 2 big points for me was learning the fine-tuning argument for the existence of God.
Kind of explain that.
So the fine-tuning argument, a lot of atheists, I mean, very academic debaters have said this is the best argument for God's existence, and I think it's true. That if you look at how physics works and how the universe is built, and you get into the math of it, really deep into the math, there's like 30 constants that you find everywhere, and they have to be these certain things. It's things like the size of a proton, the ratio of the electromagnetic force to the strong force in a nuclear bond, all kinds of stuff like that. There's 30 things. All of those appear to be very finely tuned for life to exist. If the mass of a proton was off just fractions of a percent, if it was a little bit larger, a little bit smaller, molecules would never have existed, life could never have existed. And it goes that way with all of these, but they're all just dialed just right. And the odds are so astronomical that it would happen just randomly, and this leads to where the multiverse theory comes from, is because if the atheists say, well, there's an infinite number of universes, somebody's going to get lucky, and that's true. But the odds are so astronomical. I think you're better odds of winning the lottery like 20 times in a row than hitting the jackpot we did with the fine tuning. So that was one that proved to me, okay, there is a higher power. There is some sort of intelligent design, right? I was kind of an intelligent designer. And then it was actually the case for Christ that moved me to believe in Christ's resurrection, that he was who he says he was. So those were kind of the big two in my conversion, is that I believed that there was a God, and then I believed that God was Jesus.
Gotcha.
So.
No, those are definitely some two good things. So what advice do you have somebody that may be listening to this, curious, and then they clicked on this video or this podcast, and they don't believe in God? Like, what would you say to them that is struggling to believe in God?
Yeah, so people who are non-believers, I'm probably in the minority who want to hear the academic case, and I want to hear the a logical case for God's existence. Most people will say that. They'll say, "Oh, well, explain to me why evolution doesn't work out the way we were taught, or why the Big Bang doesn't explain things." I'm okay with the academic answer, but most people really, even if you had an answer, it's not going to shake them, because what they struggle with is the emotional side. Most people struggle, I think, with the question of why do bad things happen in the end? Because I've had discussions and I've answered all the debates. Well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I've had answers. So even if you have the answers, you really need to get down to what's this person's real objection. Because a lot of times when they're asking about evolution, they're not asking about evolution. They're using that as an excuse to not have to believe, because emotionally they struggle with it. They struggle with admitting they're a sinner. They struggle with letting go that they don't have control of their own lives. They struggle with believing that they're not the master of their universe. So it's a control thing, and it's a fear thing, honestly, because if there's this God out there that will judge me for all of eternity, that's scary to people. Thinking about eternity is scary in general, but I don't know. So to the non-believers, my advice is answer the questions for yourself. If you're sitting there and you're like, "Oh, I'm not so sure," you better be sure. This question of is God or isn't he should be the most important thing in your life that frames how you live your life. And answer that question for yourself if you're a non-believer. And if it comes to, no, I don't believe God's there, okay, well, at least you did your homework.
Yeah.
And having shared the apologetics with folks, it really does. It is evident to me that heart change needs to happen. I mentioned my brother. I've vomited apologetics to him in the past that I threw way too much at him, and he wasn't ready for it. And in the end, it needed to be other friends speaking to him in different ways to get him to start questioning and to start coming to faith. Yeah. And then he would come to me and ask some questions. And that's great. But you have to kind of meet people when they're ready. Now, you don't always know when they're ready. And I'm not saying don't share the gospel. We should always be sharing the gospel. But really, you got to get down to what is someone's objection. Is it academic? Is it emotional? Is it they had a bad experience with church? They had a bad experience with other believers. People have those scars, and it scars them from having to. I mean, personally, I didn't have that. I didn't have negative personal reactions with churches, but people do. And people hear things in the news about clergy doing things that are not exactly biblical and highly and really dark. And then it's like, well, these are supposed to be the faith leaders. Yeah. And we see the darkness here, and the enemy will take that in the culture and blast it out there on the front page, because in the end, we talked about this last week, is he just wants to keep people from Christ. And in any way that is, whether that's doubting the faith because it's illogical, whether that's not wanting whispering to people so they don't want to give up control of their lives, any way to keep people from the gospel. Yeah. Or whether it's make church look like it's this hypocritical place. Why are you of a bunch of frauds? Why would you go there? Well, you'd go there because you're looking for the truth. So my advice to non-believers is answer the questions for yourself. And if you actually are honestly seeking the truth, and there's a few people out there, like I've seen over the last few years, kind of Joe Rogan going through this, that there's something to this apologetic stuff. There's something to this spiritual God stuff. And he's even speaking the name of Jesus out loud on his show. And it's because I think he's an actual truth seeker. And if you're honestly, you put all your beliefs aside and you just want to look for the truth, it's going to lead you to Christ. Yeah.
Well, what would you advise to someone who has a friend and they're prayerfully praying for their friend and they want them obviously to come to Christ? Mm-hmm. What advice would you have for them to, equip them with the right obviously we talked about resources, but like what advice would you have to somebody that is really like wanting their friend to come to Christ that is not believing in God?
Well, you said the first step. First step is pray for them. Keep them in your prayers. Prayer works. I testified earlier how prayer works personally, but prayer works. So that's step one. Step two, don't just go and think you need to vomit everything to them.
Yeah.
But when the opportunity arises, or if you have a question for them, ask them, hey, do you believe in God? Or, hey, where are you at on a faith journey? Or, hey, did you ever go to church with your family? And see what the answer is. Those are pretty innocuous questions, and it doesn't put people on too much of a defense, versus instead of asking them, hey, do you ever go to church with your family, asking, is Jesus Christ your Lord and Savior? People are put on their heels by that question a little bit, and they're suddenly like, and they don't want to have that conversation. So first is, hey, do you ever go to church? Is a little more innocuous. People are more willing to have that conversation. Then you can go from there. But another thing is big, and people overlook this, is witness through how you live your life. So if a friend of yours is a somewhat close friend who's a non-believer, they're going to know you pretty well. And if you claim to be a Christian, you're sharing the gospel, but then you go out there and you're drinking on the weekends and you're partying and you're living this sinful life that's supposedly you're supposedly this Christian, your friend's going to see that and be like, well, they don't even believe what they're saying. So witnessing through how you live and saying, when you get an opportunity and that someone's offering something, or let's go do this or let's go do that, you know what? I'm not going to take part in that because that's not what I believe. Yeah. Even if it's something that the world says is fine. No, I don't feel comfortable doing that. My faith is stronger. And people will see that. They may make fun of you. You may get laughed at as being there's that weird, prudy Christian kid. But you know what? For somebody who's generally seeking, they're going to see that. And they're going to see that, okay, they believe what they're saying. Yeah. And, witnessing through how you live your life is something everybody can do. You don't have to do the academic research. You don't have to answer these questions. Everyone, all of us should be witnessing through the way we live.
Sweet. Man, I don't have anything else, but I just wanted to thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hopefully this was helpful for the viewer. And this is the Unshaken Truth podcast, where Jesus is our unshaken truth. And thank you, Alex, for coming on the podcast again.
Thanks for having me.
So it was a joy. See you guys in the next one.